Settler violence in the occupied West Bank continues to escalate. UN figures suggest October has been the worst on record. Israeli settlers recently attacked a Bedouin community and also beat Israeli activists who were present. Israeli citizens trying to protect Palestinians are now becoming targets themselves.
This is an attack on a Bedouin community in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The attackers are the Hilltop Youth, a violent group of Israeli settlers. The footage was filmed by Lisa, a member of Torah Tzedek, a volunteer activist group that documents human rights violations against the Palestinian population in the West Bank. On October 25th, Lisa returned to Haifa with a broken arm and a head injury. Another injured activist was taken to hospital with a liver hemorrhage.
In the past, activists weren't beaten, but I quickly realized that they didn't care who I was. And as I ran past that gate, they hit me from both sides with sticks and stones. I could already feel that my arm was broken. I could feel blood running down my neck. I turned around, you can see that in the video, and saw that the whole community was on fire.
Attacks by Israeli settlers on Palestinian villages are a frequent occurrence in the West Bank. The Israeli police and army generally do not prevent the actions of the Hilltop Youth, even though they describe their actions as illegal. The conflicts mainly take place in what is known as Area C, which is under complete Israeli administrative and military control. This is where large parts of Palestinian agricultural land are located. Pastures for sheep, olive groves, everything the Palestinian population lives on. Israeli settlements are considered illegal under international law. After the attack, only a few men remained to guard what's left of the Bedouin village. The women and children left 6 months ago when the attacks began.
This isn't the first arson attack. There have been 2 or 3 in Jabba. They cut off our water supply, came at night and cut the water pipe. We spoke to the police, to the army. They did nothing, just took photos.
This is Eli Pogrebinski, a settler who came to Israel from Russia in the early 1990s.
They took the water for their sheep, so we turned off the tap. And we're very happy about that. When I look at this, I see a cancer. The proliferation has become very strong, and the land is not infinitely expandable. These people should do well, but not on my land.
Pogrebinski does not believe that Jewish youths would beat a defenseless woman, but he says the actions of the Hilltop Youth are harsh yet effective.
If you say you're against Israeli aggression, people immediately assume you're on Hamas's side, that you're against Israel. But that's not true. These are just people who care about human rights. I left after the war started and went to anti-war demonstrations in Russia. But at some point it became too dangerous there. I moved to Israel and I realized that the situation here is somewhat similar.
After the attack on the activists of October 25th, a resident of the Israeli settlement of Male Michmas was arrested. 2 weeks later, he was released, and the case was closed.
Well, for more on this, we can talk now with Alice Penepinto. She's a human rights lawyer who has done extensive research on settler violence in the West Bank and its legal and humanitarian implications. Thanks for being with us. Alice, can you tell us why we're seeing such a sharp increase in settler violence against Palestinian communities in the West Bank right now?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I think this is evidently a complex situation, but the reason for the surge in the attacks could be perhaps summarized in two parts. First of all, we have a system whereby the fringe Israeli settler movement, which is more violent than the rest of the Israeli settler movement, is closer and closer to the Israeli state mainstream positions. And in parallel to that, we have a system of widespread impunity. You mentioned yourself in the feature just now that those responsible for such horrific attacks are very rarely arrested and prosecuted, right? So at domestic level, there is virtually no legal consequence for carrying out violent attacks against Palestinians.
So you say there's very little
accountability
there. So where can the victims of the attacks, attacks turn for help?
Well, in international law, where the domestic legal system is unable and unwilling to deal properly with such incidents of violence, which in this case would reflect violations of international law, there is, of course, an international court system. And in this case, where such incidents would amount to war crimes, for instance, the International Criminal Court in The Hague could be the place to go.
What's the Israeli government's position on the settler violence in the West Bank?
This is a fantastic question. Well, since Israel occupied the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, in 1967, the position of the Israeli state vis-à-vis the settler movement as a whole has consolidated as one of working in unison, right? So the settler movement as a whole is embedded in the Israeli state since the late 60s onwards. Since 2018, with the constitutional law amendment of the Basic Law of 2018, the Jewish settlement has become, or the development of Jewish settlement has become of national value in constitutional law. So how does settlement develop, right? Well, violent settlers are at the forefront of land grab, trying to push Palestinians off their land. And that is essentially a way for the Israeli state to secure greater and greater control of Palestinian land with the smallest number of Palestinians on it.
So are you saying that the Israeli state supports the settler violence?
The Israeli state supports the settler movement and has done so politically, economically, and in terms of security presence since the late 60s onwards. Since 2018, with the law that I referenced, the development of Jewish settlement has become of constitutional value. So the Israeli state supports the settler movement in its entirety. The settler movement includes violent settlers. So I would say that settler violence is attributable under international law to the Israeli state.
Alice, thank you very much. That was human rights lawyer Alice Penepinto.
Thank you for having me.
And let's get more. I am joined now by Aviv Tatarsky. He is a researcher at the Forum for Regional Thinking, an Israeli nonprofit founded that focuses on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Welcome to the program and thank you for your time. Why are these Israeli settlers attacking Israeli activists as well?
Yes, hello, good morning. The Israeli violence against Palestinian communities, as you described, is reaching extreme heights. Today, when Israeli activists are there in order to prevent this violence, we are attacked as well.
And, as we have been discussing here, despite the ceasefire in Gaza, the violence in the occupied West Bank is surging. The Israeli army has even announced a new operation in the northern West Bank. Can you put this a little bit into the broader context for us? What do you make of these moves?
Sure. So certainly this Israeli government, but it's not a new phenomenon. It's the Israeli right and the Israeli settler political forces. They, for many years, have targeted or put a goal of ethnic cleansing. There's no other word for it in the West Bank. they didn't have an excuse to carry it out. The Hamas attack on October 7th it gave them the perfect excuse, and this is a goal which is stated explicitly by prominent ministers such as Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and others in the government. And when we hear of settlers attacking Palestinian communities, this is just the tip of the iceberg of a very strategic Israeli government decision to destroy the West Bank in a similar fashion to what it did in the Gaza Strip.
And just to be clear, the Israeli government itself would push back on the use of that term that you've just used, ethnic cleansing there. But let's move on a bit.
But maybe I should comment. Israeli ministers have stated explicitly the goal: wipe out Palestinian villages, Palestinian towns in the West Bank. If they don't want to call it ethnic cleansing, it's okay, but they have said it explicitly.
U.S. President Donald Trump has been quite explicit with the current Israeli government, saying that, that at least from the U.S. perspective, that they would not accept any annexation of the occupied West Bank. Do you think that the current Israeli government might move ahead with that? Or are those calls falling on deaf ears?
You know, annexation has all kinds of dimensions, levels. There's the formal declaration of annexation, and right now the Trump administration is not allowing Israel to go ahead with it. But expansion of settlements basically creates an annexation reality. And those attacks on Palestinian communities that push them out and that prevent any ability of a decent life, it doesn't matter for Palestinians if it's called annexation or not called annexation. And the international community, just like the Israeli police is not holding the settler attackers accountable, the international community is not holding Israel accountable. And just playing with this term, well, it's not annexed, that's far from being enough, because the situation in the West Bank is terrible.
Aviv Tatarsky, thank you very much for joining us to share your views on the situation, as we've mentioned there in the occupied West Bank. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.